Right, I'm recording this between Christmas and New Year 2022, and I thought because this will be my 100th upload as Movie Collector, I thought it was time to do something a bit different, hopefully a bit special, and so this will be my take on the best 4K UHD Blu-ray releases of 2022. I think this year has been the best year for 4K UHD Blu-ray releases so far, and I think there's a reason for that. I think the market has continued to grow, and studios, major studios in particular, have felt more confident about putting their product onto the 4K market. There do seem to be an ever-growing display of 4K discs in every branch of HMV and FOP, and so I think the future bodes well for this format. And there have been some really good releases this year. I haven't seen them all, there are reasons for that, namely because I can't actually afford them all, but of those that have come out that I haven't reviewed or haven't taken a look at, I think the most requested were the Godfather films. Now, I've only ever seen the first two films. I've got the laser discs. I've only ever spun these once, and as much as I can see, they're very good or great films. It's just not my cup of tea, or at least they weren't my cup of tea. I've never really particularly been into gangster films, but I think that's changed a little this year as I've watched quite a few of them. And Scarface, Carlito's Way, but I always like Carlito's Way. So I've been saying to people who've requested it, I really must give these another look. And then if I do enjoy them much more now, then maybe I will get those fabulous steelbooks of the Godfather films and perhaps put a review up. Another one that was getting a lot of requests, I think this might have been a 2021 release, but anyway, the steelbooks came out in 2022, and it was the Indiana Jones, well, it was a trilogy, but now there's four of them, isn't there? The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and soon to be a fifth. Well, Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of my favourite films of all time. It was groundbreaking, a real adventure, just loved every moment of it. Now, I've got this special VHS pack, which actually belonged to my father-in-law, but when he passed away, we took ownership of this because we just didn't want to see it go into a skip, but it's a very special package on VHS. I have actually run one or two of these over the years, and they are rather good. Widescreen, so letterboxed edition. Another film that many people wanted me to review because they think is the best prison film ever made, and that's The Green Mile, but I've had this on DVD since it first came out, and you can see the original Warner Brothers packaging. And Warner Brothers, if it hadn't been for them in the early days, I don't think DVD would have taken off the way it did, because they put out loads of product and really did sort of save the format as far as I was concerned. And another one that got a lot of requests for me to get, and I was so tempted. Event Horizon came out on 4K, and I was quite excited about that. I was actually there on opening night with quite a few of the crew, and I thought I must get that on 4K, but then everyone said it wasn't very good, and for once I thought, well, I'm happy with the Laserdisc, and I do like running this. It's got great packaging, and I think it's a terrific Laserdisc, a terrific film, but every time I see that 4K I keep getting tempted. Another one that people really wanted me to review was Highlander, but it's another of my favourite films that I have on Super 8, and it's not one of the better Super 8 feature releases from Duran Films, but it's still very special to have it, and I just love running that Super 8. So they were the most requested, and there have been some other films that have come out recently that I haven't had a chance to look at yet. I did actually go out to get Silent Running because I do love that film, but sadly it wasn't in stock where I went, so came home with The Driver, which is another highly regarded film that I can't actually remember seeing, so that one's going to be interesting. But there have been a couple of, well, it's Warner Brothers Home Entertainment have put out, I think, 4 or 5 Christmas movies recently, and so I've got a couple of them in the 2 for £30 sale at HMV, but I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. And I got these because Keith at Euphoria Pictures really do recommend them, and not having seen A Christmas Story before, I thought we'd watch that between Christmas and New Year, so I expect to watch one of these tonight and another one on New Year's Eve. And there was one recent release came out in Germany, but it's out in America, I think, from this year, that I haven't had a chance to look at yet, and it's the 4K of Rollerball. This is a film I've loved since I first saw it on Super 8 on a 2x400 foot cut down from Duran Film Services. But here we are now. This is basically cinema quality. I haven't watched it, but enough people have told me, and I've seen a few clips, and it does look really spectacular. So I might do a review of that one soon, even if it might not be a true 2022 release. But anyway, this is the German one. It's got reversible art, so you can get rid of the awful large certification. Anyway, to the best that I've seen in 2022. And fortunately, with the way I put things on the shelves, it does make it rather easy because they just go on the shelf in the order in which I've watched them. Now, the first notable release of 2022 is Dune. Now, that was a 2021 cinema release and came out very early, along with Last Night in Soho in 2022, and it really did make for a spectacular first outing, or big outing, for the format of the year, and people do love this film. I wouldn't say I love the film, I did very much enjoy it, but we had a great debate on this one, because on my system, on both my systems in fact, television and video projector, the last 15-20 minutes or so suffered from a really dark image. It wasn't the same on everyone's, and so when I get another system sometime in the future, I'm hopeful that I will get the best out of this disc and see it the way others did. But if you have a look at my review of Dune and go through some of the comments, you'll see a really interesting discussion on there with many of us, detailing how different this was on each of our systems, but not only our home systems. People who saw this in 2 or 3 different cinemas reported similar problems in cinemas where the ending was too dark in some and not in others. So it's not only a home video foible, that one. It does seem that it was something that was true to cinemas as well. And having mentioned Last Night in Soho, for me this was the best film of the year, the best new film of the year, and I think some people made the mistake or got the impression it was a horror movie, and so were a little disappointed by it because they love horror movies. But it's actually more of a psychological thriller. Is it in her mind or isn't it? What is really going on? Who is the killer? Was there a kill? Was there a murder? It's all a bit convoluted. I saw the trailer, thought I knew exactly what the story was beforehand, who the killer was, everything about it, and I was completely wrong and kept guessing right to the end. So I thought that was the film of the year, the new film of the year, Last Night in Soho. Did a full review of that one as well, and I think that's going to be true of all the releases I talk about here. Arrow Films always put out some wonderful special releases, and I know they'd done this in Blu-ray previously, but they put out the 4K version of one they'd got licensed to RoboCop. I hadn't seen this in years. In fact, when I did see it when it was new on VHS, I think, all those years ago, I didn't really like it much because of the violence, but now I can see it for what it is, more of a comic book, tongue-in-cheek and good-humoured film, complete with all the violence. And this was a great release with all sorts of extras, more extras than you really think are going to be in there, because there's front-of-house reproduction cards as well. So that was a great all-round release, a great package, and I think it went down very well with just about everyone who got it, even if they'd already got the Blu-ray release from the previous year or so. Another really big release that was popular was the latest Spider-Man film, No Way Home. I'm not the biggest fan of the more recent Spider-Man films, but I did really enjoy this one. I think this one is a bit more special though, because it's got the 3 Spider-Men returning in some sort of multiverse thing. But great to see Tobey Maguire back in that role, and really, for me, showing how Peter Parker and Spider-Man together, the combination of the character, really should be played. But this one was a hugely popular film and a very big seller on 4K UHD. And then that brings us on to quite a controversial release. Say controversial, and not really that controversial, but it was a 70mm release at cinemas if you were lucky enough, but then it turned out, and I did do a review of this when I actually went to see it in 70mm at the Odeon Leicester Square. It was obvious to me right from the opening that it wasn't a true 70mm release and something had been done, and it turned out my guess, or my educated guess, was right, and it was actually a 70mm struck from the lowly 4K Video Master. But Death on the Nile was shot 65mm for 70mm release, and for that reason this one does still look very special on 4K. I think it would still be in around the top 10 4Ks ever released for image quality, but not everyone agrees with me because they complain that they're all the time looking at computer generated imagery, which I'm not sure if that's entirely true, because second unit did go to Egypt with 65mm cameras to shoot the background plates that were then used in the studio as the backgrounds of the boat, the Karnak boat that they travelled down the Nile on. It's a fabulous looking 4K disc as far as I'm concerned, but it is not as good as Kenneth Branagh's previous Agatha Christie adaptation, Murder on the Orient Express. So it could have been something to do with having to shoot it during the COVID-19 pandemic, but they obviously couldn't go to Egypt for whatever reason, and hence second unit went out there, shot the background plates. Now, I did a full review of that one. I very much like the film. There's a couple of aspects I don't like about it, but I think it's worth a watch if you're into sort of, I don't know the way to describe it really, but I suppose it's more for an older audience, that one. Maybe not one for youngsters, 20-something so much, but I did love the original 1978 version of Death on the Nile, and I was a teenager when I saw that, and it grew and grew on me, and I suppose when I got into my 30s, I really started to love that film. Now, the next one I want to talk about was quite a surprise for me, because I'd never actually seen the film, but Drive, and from Second Sight Films. Now, this is a standard edition, so it's what people call bare bones, and it doesn't come with that. That was a press release because this was a press copy, but I was sent that to do a review of it, and it really is quite fabulous, despite actually only being shot 2K. You really wouldn't know, and I think this is evidence, if it were needed, what is possible with video if you shoot things well, you grade it well, and you just get the thing looking pretty much like film. Now, the special edition of that from Second Sight is akin to one of these releases. This is a Blu-ray, a sensor that I picked up earlier in the year, and it's got front of house reproductions there on cards. It's got a book, and it's got the disc in a very hard box. Second Sight releases are always special, very much like Arrow, only if anything even better at times due to the boxing they use. Just got a really good feel to them, and Drive was probably the surprise of the year because I was so impressed with that film. I really had wished that I'd invested in getting the major release, but by the time I got the money together it was all sold out, so it just shows you need to move quickly on these things. Now, the next big release that came out, and I did actually see the BFI IMAX being prepared for the premiere, the UK premiere of this over here. It was the Batman, and there are some people who really don't like this very much, but there are some others that love it more than just about any other Batman film. I really enjoyed it. I think it's about 3 hours, and it's a dark film, deliberately dark. Doesn't mean to say the picture's dark, but it really does try to capture the gothic atmosphere of Gotham, with the Batman being the Dark Knight and most of it taking place at night. I really enjoyed it. Probably not one of the best of 2022 just on the looks alone, but if you're into the Batman comic book films, then I think you should enjoy that. The next one I thought was really impressive. This is a Super 35 production. I've had discussions in the comments about whether it was a 3-sprocket or 4-sprocket high Super 35. I don't know, but the aspect ratio is around 2.0 to 1, and it is very impacttive if you're projecting this and you're able to open the masking up, or you have a high screen where you can just about fill it. So that was a good release. It's one of those first edition releases where you feel like you're going to get something special, but all it is really is the box, so the sort of a slip box, and then a few art cards or reproductions of the front of house set. But I very much like the film. It's not for everyone. I'd never really particularly liked Viking films, but I thought this one was probably the best I'd seen up to this point. So that one is worth a look if you're into violent action films, but I think the first sort of hour and a half, hour and 3/4 is better than the remainder of the film. So if you're prepared for that, you might actually find you enjoy it more. And then another really surprising release was this big box with a plastic slip cover, which is surprising how many of us sort of like this sort of thing. Edge of Tomorrow. I'd never seen this. I'd always managed to avoid it, but I've very much been getting into Tom Cruise films lately. It's quite funny. I've always liked him, but this one with Emily Blunt, I thought it was a real adventure. I do very much want to see this one again, and I've felt like that since I ran this disc. So I think it's a very good release. The only thing I didn't really like was the computer-generated aliens. I think This is one of the problems in modern films. They're always trying to outdo each other, and I think a simpler alien, maybe even a man in a suit just like a Predator, is the way to go. But these things are spinning around all over the screen, moving so inhumanly quickly that it did rather spoil the adventure for me a little. But I loved the whole time twisting, time travelling aspect to that, and going through it over and over again. So that one's a good recommendation if you can find that special pack. And then for me, what I think is the best overall package of the year. Now this is a BFI release, British Film Institute. I was a member there for years because I love going down to the National Film Theatre to see all the special shows they put on. But they've done wonderful work with this. I don't think I'd ever actually seen Get Carter. I thought I had, but when I watched it I thought, I don't remember anything of this. But for its time, 1971, this was a violent, quite disturbing, I suppose, film for many people, and it didn't do well at the box office, which is an even bigger surprise. But this overall package, and I think it was, yes, £29.99, so £30 new, with this sort of special packaging. It's got front of house cards in there, it's got a double-sided poster and a very good one, and a book. And I just thought this was really quite special. The image quality isn't the best you're going to see, but it's a very good representation of what 35mm could look like if you're watching a master print in a premiere house. So I think that one is the release of the year, but it will not be for everyone because it hasn't got Dolby Atmos sound, hasn't even got Dolby Stereo, let alone Dolby 5.1. So it's just the original mono sound, and my opinion of that is it would have been odd with anything else. And then what has to be the most controversial release of the year. Now, I didn't particularly care for the film when I saw it in the cinema, in a little local cinema, Dillon, Colorado in America, but I remembered bits of it because I couldn't believe how dark the film was, and there was one scene in particular where Robert De Niro is hiding in the shadows, and because so many people got on at me to review this film because I realised it was causing controversy. And so I looked at it and it was pretty much as I remember it. Now obviously without that print that I saw to compare it against, I wouldn't be able to say categorically this is identical to the 35mm, because it's not going to be. There's going to be differences throughout, and apparently they have darkened this up in places a bit further and they've brightened it in places. So apparently a lot of work was done, but it's pretty much as I remembered it. And Heat, Michael Mann's Heat, which that film gets a lot of love. It's quite surprising really, because my opinion is, of the gangster films I've seen this year, that Carlito's Way is actually better. But many people disagree with that, and that's fine. It's films, it doesn't really matter, and if we all had the same opinion about everything, then we would have nothing to discuss. But fortunately, two projectionists left comments about this one. They could remember projecting it when it was new, and one in particular, and I've pinned his comment to the top of my Heat review, he remembered thinking that the lamp in his projector must have been on the way out, and so he swapped it over from one studio to another to put it on a different projector, and it was just the same, thereby proving that Heat was a dark film in places when it was new. So for all those people that have got concerns because they've had the DVD or the Blu-ray and that's been done from a low contrast print, so therefore a much brighter image, rest assured that this one is going to be more accurate than what you've seen previously on home video. But it made for a very interesting discussion, and some people did actually get quite heated about it. Then The Lost City, that's not exactly going to be the best 4K you've ever seen. A lot of people don't actually enjoy the film, but I thought it was a good laugh and a great way to pass about an hour and 50 minutes, and a very nice looking movie shot on video that looks very colourful on 4K. And then Ambulance, which I watched around about the same time, that many people raved about, but I had a problem with it because of the shaky camera every time there was any major action on the screen, and it really did get to me in quite a distracting way. So after many people have said they didn't find I had a problem with it, I then put it on and watched sections of it on our telly, and they're right, on a much smaller screen it's fine. You really can get away with it, and I dare say it wouldn't bother some people on a big screen, because I think there have been so many films with a shaky camera that you do tend to get used to it if you see a lot. And then I know 4 of them were released in 2021 in this set, but the first film, got a major reworking by Paramount, and people were almost begging me to review it. I thought, I can't review Star Trek the motion picture by itself because it's not exactly my favourite Star Trek, although I do like it. So I compromised and I got Star Trek 6, and so that package with the reworked Star Trek the motion picture, the director's edition, I think people have raved about that. So I did look at how good the original release of the motion picture looked, and it does look very good. But I took a look at Star Trek 6, and I will say overall the Star Trek box set of 6 films has to be the best series release box of the year. But that is my favourite Star Trek, having just watched them all again, including Star Trek 5, which I finally got round to watching recently. I would say that as a box is one of the best releases of the year. And then we come to the biggest film of 2022 at the box office. I've forgotten how much it took. I think it was 1.7 billion. But as I made my review, it was still on in cinemas around the world. So possibly it's done almost 2 billion now. But Top Gun Maverick. And it was surprising to me because I watched this and I thought surely everyone will enjoy this load of nonsense. It's just so great to look at, so great to listen to, so over the top. The action is unbelievable, and once it starts it's non-stop. But Tom Cruise in it is brilliant. I think the entire cast is good, and what great fun. And then when I went to HMV Swindon recently to shoot a video, and I went into CEX, and there were loads of copies of the 4K of Top Gun Maverick in there, and I thought maybe everyone was not as enamoured as I was with the film. So indeed some comments have come in since that people really didn't like it, and so I suppose they bought the 4K and then immediately passed it on. So a bit of a shame really, but there's another film like that I'll talk about in a minute that is, well, say almost the same. It got an even worse reaction even though I loved it. But that takes us on to some other 4K releases. Some people aren't happy with Saturday Night Fever, but I thought it was a perfectly good representation of a 35mm print, and I made that judgment because I've got an extract from this on Super 8, and my memory of that extract, which I've watched a hell of a lot over the years, is this looked just like the grading on that Super 8 print. So maybe that's another one where Blu-rays and DVDs have been done from low contrast prints, so everything is brighter. And this was a real surprise, the War of the Worlds on 4K, and one thing that was pointed out to me since doing the review was this being a true 3-strip Technicolor. That means 3 strips of film, and therefore there's going to be increased film grain, and that's why there's more film grain on that than you would have expected. I mean, I did know that, it just passed my mind, but of course it's obvious if you think about it. Now, one I haven't done a review of, but I did mention it, but it's worth showing because it's another Arrow release of one of those special packs, Wild Things, and it's chock full of things again. But I didn't think that was a particularly brilliant film. I did enjoy it, I just thought it was a bit too convoluted in the end, and it twisted itself over and over and just got a bit silly for me. But I'd have probably loved that when I was younger if I'd have gone to see it. And so that brings me on to my most recent 4K UHD review, and my word, does this one divide opinion. I'm not sure how it divides it, but I'd like to say it was around 50-50. People love it or hate it, but it's generated such great discussions in the comments. Some of those comments haven't been particularly friendly because I think some people see a review and if you don't agree with what they think, they can just get a bit nasty. But thankfully there hasn't been much of that, and I do enjoy a good discussion about a film, and I appreciate that some people don't like it, and I've asked them why they don't like it, and it seems the most common reason is big fans of the Jurassic films. They're particularly attached to them, and they don't like it if a film comes along that doesn't match up to what has gone before or what they expect was going to come in this one. And I think bringing back the original 3 cast members suggested we were going to have another Jurassic Park classic, and it hasn't quite happened. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Jurassic films, but I do own a print of Jurassic Park on Super 8, and I've grown to really like that film over the years. So I did like Fallen Kingdom, I like the original Jurassic Park, I rather like Jurassic Park 3, and I really like this one. Now for me, this is probably the most enjoyable of the 6 films. That doesn't mean to say it's the best film, I still think that's Jurassic Park, but it's interesting how it's divided opinion. You may not like it, but a lot of people have seen it and said, yeah, they really enjoyed the ride, but what a load of rubbish. And one other thing that people cite is there's a young girl that was introduced in Fallen Kingdom that's a clone, and how ridiculous doing a clone of a human. Well, one thing I want to point out is how ridiculous producing dinosaurs from DNA that's found in mosquitoes that have been enveloped in amber. So what is more ridiculous, cloning a human or bringing back dinosaurs? I don't know. I mean, the whole thing's ridiculous, but who cares when it's served up like this? It looks as good as this, and it sounds as good as this, and it's just non-stop thrill ride. Yes, it's pretty daft when something like a pterodactyl or a bigger version of that comes in and brings down a plane, but you just got to get wrapped up in it and accept it for what it is. So I think that one was a good one for me to end the year on. It came out earlier in the year, but it's always good to generate a bit of controversy and perhaps disagree with what has gone before. But when I expect to review a film, I try and make sure I don't watch anyone else's reviews. And likewise, we're doing this roundup of 2022. I'm now going to choose my top 10. As I said, my pick for 2022 is Get Carter. It's not going to be the best release for everyone, but it's my pick of the package of the year. Then I think I would say that because I love the film so much, Last Night in Soho. And then the release of the year, in terms of blockbuster appeal, Top Gun Maverick, but there are some people out there who don't like it. Then I think it's going to be the Edge of Tomorrow package, the special package, and then possibly Jurassic World Dominion at number 5. Then in number 6, I think Drive, number 7 RoboCop, number 8 Death on the Nile, number 9 Dune, and number 10 the Star Trek box set. So they're my top 10, but I've enjoyed watching them all. But here's one alternative for you, because Ambulance I think probably has the best soundtrack of all. So if you don't mind the shaky cam, you'll find the image quality on this is exceptionally good too. So for the best sound with fantastic image quality, bar the shaky cam, then Ambulance may be the choice for you. But one other thing I noted down that I wanted to say was I think the mastering of these discs has improved of late, certainly this year. And I think the reason for that is the people who do the mastering, the grading, I think they've got into how to do high dynamic range, and we're no longer seeing all those blown out discs where the HDR is just too bright and you've got to turn it down and fiddle throughout the film, which is, it can be annoying. It's not happening on everyone's systems, but I certainly get it here on both of mine. But I think the application of HDR seems to be universally more sorted now than it was. Other notable titles that came out on 4K in 2022 include Cannibal Holocaust. Yes, people asked me to take a look at that, but no thank you. I saw that at a cinema back in the day when it was new, 16mm print in an open-air cinema in the south of France. Then there was West Side Story, Steven Spielberg's new version, which I almost bought, but I just missed the sale in HMV, so I left it and I haven't seen it since, but musicals are not really my thing. There's only in America, actually, the Criterion 4K release of Brian De Palma's Blowout, which I can't actually remember ever seeing, and it certainly looks like my sort of thing, and a lot of people asked me to take a look at that, so I do hope to get that soon. Then there were the Dollars film, Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, which people are telling me look fabulous, and I've questioned them because it was shot Techniscope, and if you want to know what that is, look it up. It's basically half 35mm. Dirty Dancing, but what I've told about that is that people think the transfer is not very good, but how do we know without a 35mm to check it against? And Second Sight put out a special version of Dog Soldiers, which was shot Super 16 and apparently looks fabulous. Singing in the Rain, which is getting plaudits because it's an original 3-strip Technicolor, so the colour is exceptional, really rich, vibrant, whatever word you want to use other than pop. And Poltergeist, Tobe Hooper's fabulous classic, that is enough to scare the living daylights out of most people. And a classic from Quentin Tarantino, Pulp Fiction, that I haven't actually seen since it was in the cinema. So it's been a great year, and next year looks set to continue in the same vein. There's a little film that people have told me they'd love to see on 4K. It's a James Cameron film, and because Avatar: The Way of Water looks like it's going to be another blockbuster, it looks like when that comes out, The Abyss has also been slated, it's been prepared anyway, for 4K release. But there's another one coming up, and if you think about it, it's a 50th anniversary of a big film from 1973 that I seem to remember was rather scary. Had a priest in it played by Max von Sydow. I wonder what that could be. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing so I'll be encouraged to carry on creating content like this again in the future. Until the next video, bye bye for now.